Okay, I've got an AI rant for you, Russ. AI. So I'm looking for information on AI. Now, we're doing this Ginastera album today.
Right.
And he's mentioned in one of the books of British author Louis de Bernières, and he has this Latin American trilogy, and he mentions Ginastera and compares his music to Carlos Chavez, the Mexican composer. I was trying to figure out which book it was. I didn't want to look through the book, and I couldn't find the passage, so I just decided to ask AI, which book is this in? And it just sidesteps the question and feeds you a lot of nonsense about the novel, and even wrong information, like it doesn't know what's in which of these books and stuff.
Oh, no.
It's like talking to a politician. You just don't get a straight answer. This drives me crazy.
Still leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I am not impressed by AI, I have to say.
I think I want to still rely on real intelligence rather than the artificial kind, if there's any out there.
Yeah, I'm going to make a prediction. You know what? You can come back and complain about it later. I'll take my lumps. AI is never going to achieve human-type consciousness. What is this nonsense? You know, this whole transhumanist dream, it's crazy. It's not going to happen.
Anyway, we know where all the real intelligent people are. They're listening to Adult Music, the
That's
podcast
right.
with music for the mature mind. This week, we're at episode 224.
Wow. 224, huh?
Mm-hmm. And before we get into new material, I got some thanks to go out. We had some people share our episode last week. First of all, in the classical category, flautist April Clayton. We heard in the last episode with Torrential Rain Dance. That was on Urtext label.
Yeah, thank you for sharing our episode, April. That was really great that we got that recognition from you.
And that was with composer and the pianist on the album, Miguel de Aguila.
It was a good record. I'm hoping they put out a CD of that. I'm really interested in acquiring one.
And then on the jazz side, over in Italy, we want to give thanks to Javier Girotto. We listened to Desde Quando. That was on Palco della Musica with our favorite trumpeter in Italy, Fabrizio Bosso, and their group Latin Mood. We really enjoyed that recording. So thanks for sharing our episode, Javier. Also, one of his fans here in Japan shared the episode. That was Miki Suzuki. Don't know who she is, but thanks for that if you're listening, Miki. And unfortunately, I don't know, what is this? 4 weeks in a row, I can't get away from the piano here, Mike. So let me get over to the piano again. Crack my knuckles here.
Oh my God.
Get ready to play the theme. All right, one in the jazz category this week. We want to send out a rest in peace to Sheila Jordan, American jazz singer and songwriter from Detroit, Michigan. She passed away on August 11th at the age of 96.
Well, that's a long life.
She was known for her unique bebop and scat singing style. Sometimes she was accompanied only by upright acoustic bass. She came from a difficult childhood and then began singing as a teenager in Detroit. She was influenced by and became a friend of the great Charlie Parker, marrying Parker's bandmate, pianist Duke Jordan. Jordan collaborated with notable musicians like George Russell and Steve Kuhn throughout her career. She served as an adjunct professor of music at City College of New York from 1978 to 2005 and taught at other musical institutions. Her recording career started way back in 1961, and she has a discography of around 24 recordings as a leader, even releasing Portrait Now on Dot Time Records in February of this year. And her own original portrait of Sheila was released on Blue Note way back in 1963. So that's quite a career.
Yeah.
So rest in peace, Sheila Jordan. All right, before we get into this week's new music, in the episode description, as always, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings that we'll discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. Now, if you can't see the full description or the recording list and links are hard to access on your app or whatever platform you're listening to us on now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, podbean.com. Everything's clear and easy to follow over there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us and tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music category recommendations on the podcast services, and that helps us increase our audience as well. Come over and follow us on our Facebook page, too, to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. You can leave a message or comment there as well. Check us out on X too at Adult Music Pod. I post the new episode links over there. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples as part of our discussion, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And this week we're going to be starting out in the Baroque.
We went a week without the Baroque, actually, last week. So I found another one. This is an album of music by Bach, Telemann, and Albinoni, called simply Concerti. So it's Concerti by Bach and Telemann, really, and Albinoni is Symphonias. And this is by Ensemble Masques, with Olivier Fortin, the harpsichord and director, and also features Sophie Gent on violin. Actually, I wonder if that's Sophie Gent on violin, and Kathleen Kajioka on viola. Ensemble Masques is a small ensemble, so let me just give them some credit here. They are Louis Creech and Paul Montero on violin, Fanny Pecoud on viola, Melisande Corriveau on cello, wow, what a beautiful name, Benoit van den Bernden on contrabass, and Olivier Fortin, harpsichord and director. So this is going to be an all-strings recording, including our two soloists. And no problem about that. The program on this album is an 18th century musical bridge between Germany and Italy. In the program, the two Italian works by Albinoni are orchestral works without a soloist that link the German works, all concertos, featuring a soloist. So I guess the Italian works are kind of the bridge between the concertos. The booklet note is in the form of an interview with the soloists and Ensemble Masques director, Olivier Fortin. So we don't get too much background on the music itself, but got some interesting comments about especially the Telemann piece. But let's start with tracks 1 through 3. Johann Sebastian Bach, Concerto for Violin in A minor, BWV 1041. The first movement, track 1, has no tempo marking, and this recording has clear sound, and the tempo taken is more on the cautious side. The violin solo is completely without vibrato and produces a sort of downcast effect, though it gets some sprightly lines. So there are contrasting emotions in the same line. One thing I like about the tempo at this speed is that all of Bach's false cadences and surprising harmonic turns register strongly, almost stopping the music. And I think I can pick one of those up in one of these samples. Let's see what happens here. Actually, we did get the false cadence right at the very beginning of that sample, but not within it. Anyway, the movement comes across as leisurely and pleasant to listen to, and it's a little bit sad too, I think. Well, I guess it's that minor key giving that sadness. Track 2, the second movement, Andante. In the accompaniment, I appreciate the full, even-sounding range from fully present-sounding bass and continuo to the high end. Let's hear the violin's lyrical entry in this movement. And the bass end is very present and very satisfyingly recorded on this album.
Yeah, I wrote that in my notes too. We don't usually get to hear an actual bass in this kind of music, so it really fills it out.
Yeah, really fantastic sound. Really kind of upholstered, cushioned kind of sound, too, on the recording. The violin plays lyrically throughout, and the lack of vibrato brings a touching quality to Bach's winding lines. Track 3, the third and final movement, Allegro assai. Tempo here is more upbeat, and the rhythm has a sprightly bounce. The violin has some quick sleight-of-hand type ornaments to add to the violin line in the piece. I want to pick up some of the accompaniment rhythm in the solo, so we'll go from here. Now you notice right before that cadenza, the sudden slowing, when we got that false cadence. That happens a lot through the album. They sort of give you little signs that these little magical harmonic moments are happening. Tracks 4 through 7, our first work by Tommaso Albinoni, Sinfonia 5 in G major, Opus 2, number 1, so we got a brighter major key here. The first movement is marked grave to adagio, though, so it's going to be slow. It starts with counterpoint emerging in the opening lines, played again without vibrato, with unwavering tone. A rhythm slowly develops as the continuo comes in to accent chords. It's appealing the way this piece moves seamlessly from grave to adagio. You don't really notice the cutoff. And then we get to track 5, the second movement, Allegro, and I'll just start by sampling this. And the ensemble and the recording both together give us this sort of warm, polyphonic kind of pool that we can luxuriate in. So the tempo here is on the slow side, but we get a sense of traffic in the polyphonic lines all coming in closely together. There's a thickness of tone to this work. The rhythm grows more lively as the work goes on, with subtle accents added at points. The whole texture actually lightens up considerably by the end. It's kind of a magic trick, so listen to the whole movement. The ending sounds fulfilling. And then we move to track 6, the third movement, Adagio. Slowly played chords open the movement. The movement passes with a heavyish mournfulness, the bass instruments registering as strongly as the higher ones. There's a great, even sort of frequency spectrum. We get just even tone throughout. It sounds great. And track 7 is the fourth movement, Allegro assai. This is the last movement. This brief movement restores a lively quality to the work. The sound of the harpsichord lightens the overall tone here. We hadn't heard it in previous movements. Let's hear a sample. So they hit those cadences and just keep going. Really energetic movement. Okay, tracks 8 through 11. This is really the album's centerpiece, and it was also my favorite work on the album. Georg Philipp Telemann, Concerto for Viola in G major, TWV 51, capital G9, capital G meaning a major key. Yeah, this was, we've been hearing a lot of Telemann works lately that have been really interesting, and this is one of them.
Nice to hear viola works, too.
Yeah, especially from the Baroque era. You didn't really get too many of these. Track 8 is the first movement, Largo. The opening has an introductory quality to it. The deep-sounding solo viola is in at the 30-second mark, and I'm just going to start with that sound. It's a little kind of more shaded than the violin tone is. Let's hear it. A satisfying cadence at the end of that phrase. It's rather surprising to hear the viola's tone up front after the program we've just heard. Once again, the handoff from the solo instrument to the violins is seamless. This is a deeply satisfying performance. We also get some low notes from the viola, adding some unexpected character to the movement. The viola gets a brief solo cadenza before the cadence at the end, and then we move to the second movement, track 9, Allegro. Now, Kathleen Kajioka, the viola soloist here, says that this and the final movement occasionally highlight the viola's size and the discomfort that can cause, a comment I found intriguing. The viola comes in virtuosely at about 20 seconds in, and I like to highlight a moment I think that Kajioka is talking about regarding the viola's size. I think it comes in the sudden slowing at certain parts. Listen about 20 seconds into the sample. You should be able to hear it. There's a sudden slowing. Okay, so we heard it twice, like right there at the end. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, it sounds like it's like a really heavy thing to carry or something. It's kind of a cute effect. The viola does achieve some fleet playing in the middle of the movement and towards the end, though. Track 10 is the third movement, Andante. Melancholy, according to the soloist Kathleen Kajioka, is the viola's specialty, and Telemann exploits that here. The accompaniment at the beginning has a full yet transparent tone, very appealing, and a lightly trudging rhythm. The viola is in with its melancholy tone at about the 20-second mark, with minimal but pleasing accompaniment in the staccato line of the cello. Telemann keeps the cello in that melancholy mood. Let's hear a bit of this as the work is going on. This is about the 1 minute and 45-second mark. Once again, the viola gets a moody, brief cadenza toward the end. And then track 11 is the fourth movement, Presto. It's a complete contrast in tempo, as this movement takes off from the beginning, and the viola is given some of the most virtuosic lines it's had in the work. At the end, Telemann brings the soloist back to reality by returning the viola to its usual place as an accompanist, which Kajioka finds hilarious. Tracks 12 through 15, we get another Albinoni work. This is his Sinfonia a Cinque in G minor, Opus 2, number 6, according to the booklet note. Deezer claims it's Opus 2, number 11, so I don't know what to make of this. booklets have been incorrect before, so I can't really say. Anyway, track 12, the first movement, Adagio. This is a slow, mournful movement drawn out by the ensemble. The viola melody repeats throughout. The tempo is kept at a slowly trudging pace throughout. Track 13 is the second movement, Allegro. This upbeat movement has its melody drawn out by the ensemble. It's given an energetic tempo, but remains on the slow side. Strings have churning patterns as the violin plays the melody above. Track 14, the third movement, Grave. This movement features harpsichord playing a gentle continuo behind the heavier sounding strings up front. It's an attractive, mournful melody. But where are all the samples? Anyway, coming up in the fourth movement, Allegro, this movement has an attractive bounce to it, and this is where I'm going to play the sample. And just appealing all the way through. Tracks 16 through 18, Johann Sebastian Bach's Concerto for Violin in E major, BWV 1042. This, like the first concerto, features Sophie Gent on the violin solo. Track 16, the first movement, Allegro. This is taken at a pretty slow tempo, taking the usual sprightliness away from it. It's got energy, though. I'd say it's understated here. Let's hear some of the violin's solo part.
That is very relaxed.
Yeah, we know this piece pretty well, right? We've heard this many times in our lives, I think. Yeah, but it works well, I think. It's just kind of the other performances of it with that real bounce that it usually has just kind of interferes, I think, with our kind of, just we got to let go of that and listen to this. I really did enjoy this performance. The solo, with its lack of vibrato, tends to blend in with the other strings, and it sort of sticks out because of the writing, not because of the tone, and brings an interesting angle to this work. After the middle section, there's a long pause before the opening theme repeats. It's sort of a laid-back performance of this familiar work, and the phrasing makes it work well. Track 17, the second movement, Adagio. There's lightly brushed string accompaniment as a cello doubled by harpsichord harmony plays the theme. The violin comes in lightly with a subtly played sustained tone. It then takes over melodic duties. Long pauses are taken after cadences, as in the first movement, and the ensemble and soloist keep up a gentle tone throughout. Track 18, the third and final movement, Allegro assai. As is the case throughout this album, the energy picks up significantly here. Speed is still on the slower side, but there's an appealing flow and accent to the rhythm, making it dance. The violin, as throughout the work, plays gently and with subtlety. Once again, there's a bit of a pause, though not as dramatically long as the one in the first movement, before the theme is stated one last time. And that's the album. This album came across more on the soothing rather than the exciting side, and the Bach and Telemann works are compositions that can excite. I rather liked the approach, though. All tempos are a bit slow, but the blend of the ensemble is so beautifully even and the lines are so well played that you sort of relax into the performances. The album has a kind of dusky glow to it. As always, the Telemann work caught my attention for its appeal, despite the fact that Telemann himself composed so much music. This is part of the reason I don't really know Telemann's music well, is that his catalog is just so huge that I really don't know where to start with it. So I'm really grateful to musicians like Kathleen Kajioka and the Ensemble Masques and Olivier Fortin for singling out this work for us. The Telemann work features a lot of playful moods, as well as the viola's melancholy, and Kathleen Kajioka responds to all of them appealingly. Sophie Gent in the solo violin part in the Bach works tends to blend with the ensemble, allowing Bach's writing to draw her playing to the ear, especially when she's got more virtuosic passages. This isn't your run-of-the-mill Baroque album. It doesn't try to sparkle, yet it has ample energy and lyrical beauty and puts the listener in a comfortable space.
Sensitive and extremely musical interpretations from Ensemble Masques and the soloist here. I'm familiar with the Bach concertos, and the final E major concerto started noticeably more relaxed than I'm used to, as I pointed out, but I liked it. The tonal balance throughout the recording is excellent. I especially enjoyed the rich bass lines, and the programming idea was enjoyable, having the Albinoni ensemble works separating the solo works and then having the Telemann viola work at the center was really great. The composition really highlights the warm tonal character of the viola, and the recording has great sonics throughout. It's detailed, yet very warm. Absolutely enjoyable Baroque music here.
Okay, now that you're all relaxed, let's snap you out of that with our next album by a composer whose music has been called barbaric, I think by Louis de Bernières, the author that I was talking about earlier, but it's music that I really love. Alberto Ginastera, Argentinian composer from the 20th century, in 3 works that I've never heard before. These are his 3 string quartets. These are played by the Miró Quartet and features also Kiera Duffy, soprano. We'll get to that later. Anyway, this is on the Pentatone label, and it was released July 25th, 2025. Now, okay, I just wrote to Pentatone today because I was going to do one of their albums next week, but I'm going to put it off for a while because I need more information. The booklet for the Ginastera has no track listing or artist background in the booklet. These are just notes on the program on Ginastera himself, and it features photos and acknowledgments as well. Thankfully, the booklet does include the sung texts for String Quartet number 3, so I was grateful for that, and we'll get to that when we come to it. All right, so I want to just say that I already wrote to them about this, but Pentatone Records, please include artist information in your booklets. It's important. Yeah. We need to know, and also we need to know the track listing too. I mean, I know I can get it elsewhere, but why should I go elsewhere? Let me look in the booklet. I'm sure it's on the back of the CD case, but when you have a digital booklet, you should probably attach that if you don't want to write the track listing in the booklet. Anyway, there you go. Tracks 1 through 4, String Quartet number 1. Don't let me turn you off this album because it's actually pretty interesting. I liked it a lot. String Quartet number 1, Opus 20, composed 1948. This work celebrates the gauchos, the landless native horsemen of the Argentinian plains, the cowboys of the Pampas. The first and last movements evoke the 6/8 dance movements of the Malambo, which Ginastera has set many times. The Malambo is the Argentinian folk dance associated with the gauchos. All right, now check out this first movement. It's labeled Allegro Violento and Agitato. Yes, violento means violent. And it's the kind of marking that someone like Bartók would use, right? Allegro Barbaro in his case. He has a piano piece called Allegro Barbaro. But I think there's a little nod towards Bartók there. The piece starts pretty aggressively. Ginastera's music tends to be very aggressive, and this is one of the things I love about it, because we don't think about classical music as being aggressive. He did a lot to change that. The Miró Quartet take an approach more based on precision than aggressiveness, yet the aggressive quality comes through. The rhythm as performed is on the metronomic side. I should say that this makes the movement more evocative of an actual dance. What draws the ear is the really cool melody, played by the violin. Listen to the opening of this. This is really a little different than quartets that you normally hear. It sounds a bit wild, but is as domesticated as is possible in this performance. A new section starts after the sample, and then once we reach the development section, there are moments when the chugging rhythm completely stops and we're exposed to some colorful chords. There's often a kind of delirium to Ginastera's music, and we hear a bit of that toward the end of the second minute. There are some great slips into new material in the movement. The way he sort of changes sections is pretty exciting. But I think the performance holds back some of the intensity that's really built into this work. Just listen to the last chords. They could take your head off if slashed at more intensely, but this performance is going more for accuracy and fidelity to the score. Track 2, the second movement, Vivacissimo. The movement starts at a quiet dynamic, yet with an aggressive rhythm. This is one of the great elements of these quartets, the constant use of appealing rhythm. The Miró does well to keep all of the sections flowing one into another. It's one of the exciting elements in Ginastera's writing. Let's hear a little bit of this. Now this sounds like a really rhythmically complicated movement, yet it sounds aggressive. The quartet doesn't seem to be holding back as much as they did in the first movement here, and yet they're doing all this really impressive playing at that tempo and with that intensity. Many techniques are used in this movement, including pizzicato and bouncing the bow off the strings. There's even a harmonic section just after the 3-minute mark. Another exciting movement with great rhythmic momentum composed into the score. Track 3, the third movement, Calmo e Poetico. Boy, calmo is not a marking you see very often in Ginastera's music. Anyway, we have it here. The opening 6-note chord mirrors the tuning of the open strings of the guitar. I noticed that right away, actually, without even being told. Let's hear that. Okay, I'm going to come out of that there. It takes a while to get going, but it's a really evocative opening. The phrase repeats. The effect is one of a quiet dawn to me. It sounds like a beginning of things, a soft arising. There are more extended effects in this movement, such as the eerie string effects at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that are also heard near the beginning of Stravinsky's Firebird. The rhythms are all smoothly integrated within the overall structure of the score, and this performance gives a satisfying sense of each movement's shape. The movement features all sorts of intriguing timbral changes. I especially like the entire sound conjured at about the 5-minute mark, and I'm going to go in and sample that as well. Great balancing of lines by the Miró Quartet to achieve that effect. At 5 minutes and 40 seconds, the strings play in a more traditional manner. At the very end of the movement, the tuning guitar strings effect of the opening is heard again, perhaps marking the end of the day. Sul ponticello tones are interspersed between. And track 4, the fourth movement, Allegramente rustico. There's a strong rhythm here. The first theme ends, and then a new, lighter rhythm begins just before the 1 minute mark. Again, the rhythm is carefully put forward so that all the detail comes through. We do get a sense of the drive embedded in the rhythm, and I love the sudden changes into something more mysterious, such as we hear at the 2 minute mark. I also like the pizzicato take on the theme right after that, and that's where I'm going to pick up this sample at around the 2 minute and 10 second mark when the pizzicati begin. The whole effect is sort of like a dance played on a guitar. I rather like it. I've said I like a more aggressive approach, but this pizzicato section doesn't sound like it can be played any differently than it is here. I really enjoyed all the detail coming out of that. When the opening material returns, it's got more elan to it in the performance. Elan, momentum, or sort of a build-up. And there's an exciting build to the end of the work. Tracks 5 through 9, String Quartet number 2, Opus 26, 1958. In this quartet, 10 years after the first one, there are no more folk melodic or rhythmic cells, nor is there any symbolism. There are just Argentine elements, such as strong obsessive rhythms, meditative adagios, suggesting the quietness of the pampas, and more. The work is written entirely in the 12-tone technique, say the notes, created by Schoenberg. Now, don't run away yet. You don't really notice that, and I'm not really sure it's true. He may be using all 12 tones, but he's not using it in any kind of serial form, or at least it doesn't seem that way to me, because there are a lot of repeating notes in this.
I thought so too, yeah.
Yeah, I can't really make out how this is composed. This is track 5, the first movement, Allegro rustico. The opening is exciting and aggressive with sawing lines in the violins. Yeah, this is what I wanted to hear in track 1, in the first string quartet. Here, we're very aggressive. There are repeated notes, and as I said, this isn't strict 12-tone technique, although it seems Ginastera is using all 12 notes, as the melodic material is reaching in every direction. Okay, fasten your seatbelts. Let's listen to this. Oh, yeah. And I want to say those upward moving scales, that sounds like harmony to me. Those sound like scales. I don't know what we're doing here. By the 1 minute and 27 second mark, the piece quietens and there's a pause. Then we get some of the mysterious, quiet, nocturnal music that a composition style like 12-tone is so good at achieving. The music slowly builds up energy until at 2 minutes and 49 seconds, there's another rhythmic freakout with aggressively played repeating chords. I have to say, the Miró Quartet throw themselves into this piece far more aggressively than they did in the first string quartet. In this particular movement, we get fiery, seat-of-the-pants playing. Even the pizzicato parts at 4 minutes and 30 seconds come across with high energy. The middle quiet section comes back at the 5 minute mark. There's a fantastic upward rush from the string quartet to the end of the movement with furiously sawed-out repeating chords. I like those sawed-out chords. It's like a great sound from the string quartet. Track 6, Adagio angoscioso. Angoscioso, I guess, would mean anxious or anguished. I'm not really sure. The viola, I think, starts the work in the melodic figure. It sounds like it's in that viola range at least. It's a cello in a high range if it's not a viola. The rest of the quartet accompany with lightly bowed, bloodless chords. By the 1 minute and 52-second mark, we have individual tones hanging around like paint dripping down a canvas. The harmony has a lot of color to it. There's a tense, furiously bowed chord section after this into the 3rd minute. I'm going to grab a little bit of that at around the 2 minute and 40-second mark. Some pretty wild harmony in there. Once this decrescendos and naturally fades, the opening motif is heard again on the viola in the 4th minute. The movement ends with harmonic chords accompanying a single sustained note. Track 7, Presto Magico. That's the 3rd movement. This starts quietly with some sul ponticello bowing. The cello's sound at the beginning of this fanatically dancing movement is especially fantastic. There are glissandos ping-ponging between instruments. The violin goes up high and plays a line. There's a lot of quick, light ensemble playing in this movement, and it's very impressive playing by the Miró Quartet. Let's hear a part of it at around the 2 minute mark. Yeah, those sort of swooping glissando sounds are sort of a motif in this particular movement. Toward the end of the 2nd minute, the rhythm picks up a quick dance quality. The movement ends with a quick flick of pixie dust by the middle strings. Track 8, the 4th movement, Libero e Rapsodico. A set of virtuosic variations for each instrument based on the song Triste el día sin sol, triste la noche sin luna. Sad as a day without sun, sad as a night without the moon. A solo violin plays the opening line mournfully. There's a considerable emotion in the tone here. The cello is in at the 1 minute and 50-second mark, playing heavy double stops down low, with the upper violins slashing and plucking at various times during the cello solo. At around the 2 minute and 30-second mark, there's an outburst in the upper end, and the piece has a flash of energy. The timbre changes to some hollow effect that may be achieved by the bow, if not sul ponticello. One of the violins then emerges with a solo line over lower wisps of harmonized melody. The movement ends with a sustained chord. And then we get a 5th movement on track 9 marked Furioso. Yeah, that's a tempo marking that you hear often in Ginastera. Furious bowing opens the movement at about a mezzo forte dynamic, but it's not aggressive in tone. As this happens, a melody pops out of the texture. I'm going to go straight to that at around 45 seconds in. And I want to say in this performance, I think the Miró Quartet are getting the proper amount of aggression. We're really hearing some solid dynamic playing here.
Yeah.
From this point on, the piece alters between focusing on that rhythm or having individual instruments throw their melodic 2 cents into the boiling pot of bowing. There's a pretty spectacular figure that brings the quartet into the higher end, starting at around the 3-minute and 50-second mark, and the whole thing comes to a sudden stop after a final furious digging into a harsh final chord. The Miró Quartet throw themselves into this entire work. It's a very different approach than we heard in the first quartet. And this energy continues into the third quartet, String Quartet number 3, Opus 40, composed in 1973. And this features a soprano, and the soprano in question is Kiera Duffy. The vocal element is inspired by Schoenberg's use of the soprano voice in his second string quartet. This piece sets texts from poems written by 3 famous Spanish 20th century poets, Juan Ramón Jiménez, Federico García Lorca, and Rafael Alberti. The theme is the transformative power of music, the intensity of sensual love, frightening visions of war, and a deep, pervasive strain of nostalgia. He gets a lot in there. Track 10, the first movement, Contemplativo. The quartet starts with a single thread of tone, slowly building and taken in unison by the second violin. A harmony spreads throughout the quartet and slowly grows. There's no marked rhythm at the opening. The vocal is in at 1 minute and 10 seconds, sounding very upfront with ample space around it. The vocalist has to both sing and speak the words at various times. The strings have all eerie, sustained sul ponticello-derived thin tones in this movement. Then they suddenly burst out in more colorful, aggressive patterns at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The soprano is in over some ear-shattering tones from the quartet, and that's the part I'm going to sample. All right, let's just come out there. There's a long pause and we get some quiet material coming up there. I got to mention, Kiera Duffy doesn't sound much like a Hispanic name to me, but I think she does well with the Spanish language in this piece. She's in character very well. After Duffy's aggressively taken high note, the soprano speaks the rest of the verse over calmer accompaniment. The strings revert to their opening thin timbre and sustained tones, then burst out into another colorful pattern as the soprano sings the third verse of the poem. The technique is the same. The first half of the verse is sung, the second spoken. The last verse of Juan Ramón Jiménez's poem, called La Música, is sung to a calm accompaniment, and the line that she sings means, music, naked woman, running crazy through the pure night. The last tone we hear is the vocalist singing the last word, and I think I've experienced that. Track 11, the second movement, Fantastico. This movement starts with tentative, quiet sounds from the quartet, as though something is stirring, looking for direction. This is a completely instrumental movement, the only one in the quartet. Via circling figures and a crescendo, we get something that reminds me of the terror of George Crumb's Black Angels. Let's hear a sample of this. This doesn't last long, though. It eventually decrescendos, and we hear stirring figures quietly play it again. Again, a sort of scraping tone in harmony is reached forte in the high end. The movement seems to repeatedly crescendo to hysteria, then dip into mysterious quiet doings. The direction Fantastico obviously means the realm of fantasy here. Track 12, the third movement, marked Amoroso, And the poem set here is Canción de Belisa by Federico Garcia Lorca. It begins as the first movement did, with a sustained tone, and that tone then slides up into a microtone as the rest of the quartet come in harmony and do the same. Ginastera's got some interesting ideas for the quartet medium, I have to say. Those quarter-tone glissandos are a structural part of the movement as we hear them throughout. By the third minute, the quartet is playing at forte volume with some pretty interesting harmony. The vocal isn't in until around the 4-minute and 20-second mark, and that's where I'm going to sample. Now the thing is, when there's a vocalist in, your ear just goes right to that. But you want to pay attention to the string quartet in this too, because they're doing some really interesting things underneath the vocal, as you heard after that line ended, if you kind of were listening to that. It's pretty interesting. So the vocal enters under those quiet chords in the quartet, and they keep fairly mezzo piano throughout the vocal. Duffy herself produces some intriguing tones, and I think enunciates the Spanish text with character, as I mentioned before. Track 13, the fourth movement, Drammatico. This has a very aggressive opening from the quartet, which suddenly quietens for the Rafael Alberti text, which is titled Morir al Sol. Let's hear a little bit of this. I really love those crystalline tones that the string quartet gets while Duffy is singing. We really got to zero in on that, because we always want to just listen to the voice. We're so trained to do that once a voice comes in, because it's singing words, so we're thinking of meaning as well. Anyway, once the vocal finishes, the quartet emphatically takes center stage for a moment, as though commenting on the text, which is about a dying soldier. The poem is gone through pretty quickly, particularly the longer third verse, and the movement reaches a dramatic conclusion. Then we reach the final fifth movement on track 14, Di Nuovo Contemplativo. The opening recalls the first movement with thin, sustained tones from the quartet, descending this time. Here the poem set is Ocaso, which means sunset, by Juan Ramón Jiménez, the author of the first movement's poem. It's a gorgeous poem about the gold of the sunlight now going to eternity, and when night comes. Duffy's vocals here are especially impressive. I liked her solid sustain of the low tone at 2 minutes and her floated note at 2 minutes and 43 seconds. I'm going to get all of that in this sample. And again, notice the gossamer tones from the string quartet as Duffy sings that light high note. Also, when I began the sample, Duffy was holding a note, and she had been holding it for some time before that, And it's a really impressive feat there. There's another impressively long sustained note by Duffy from around the 3-minute and 30-second mark that ends the piece. Not everyone's going to be able to perform this work. It sounds really tough for the vocalist as well as the string quartet. The piece ends tranquilly. All in all, I really liked this, though I found the approach to the first string quartet puzzling. The Miró quartet really digs into the second quartet and are highly expressive with their alterations of timbre in all three quartets. So why does the first quartet sound so careful? It sounds tough to play, but I would have liked more aggression there. That said, balances are perfectly judged, and all three quartets come across beautifully characterized. In the third quartet, Kiera Duffy's tone is strong, which is perfect for Ginastera, and her intonation of the Spanish text comes across with the character of the Spanish language. The second and third string quartets are played with the aggression and momentum that's really required from Ginastera's heavily rhythmic approach. This is an interesting release for fans of Ginastera's music. I, of course, was fascinated by it. I just wish that first string quartet were a little less cautious.
All three quartets sound technically challenging to play. The performance here is impressive physically and tonally.
Yeah.
Musically, the first work is very tonal and rhythmic and not too dissonant at all. And then the second quartet takes us somehow into 12-tone territory. But the continued rhythmic focus and interesting techniques keep your interest throughout the changing tonal landscape. And then the third quartet is the most abstract. The demands on the voice in the writing must be intimidating, but Kiera Duffy performs amazingly on the vocal performances. However, musically, I'm not sure that repeated listenings will endear this final work. It's a little bit of that Ginastera histrionic sense that overwhelms me in this one. So, amazing performance. Probably opposite of you, I enjoyed the first quartet the most of the material here.
Well, I liked the first quartet too. I just kind of thought that the performance was a little less dramatic than the second two. I think there was a lot more drama written into the score that wasn't pulled out. And as far as the third quartet goes, I think I would have liked that. I guess it just depends on what you like there.
Yeah. So
there you go. All right. Our third album is we're going to bring you back down to a calm place again where we need to be, and rather a sort of esoteric meta view of the world with the music of Valentin Silvestrov. Now, Silvestrov was born in 1937. That makes him 87 years old. He's going to be 88 on September 30th, and he's still going. This is a recording of his Symphony No. 8 and of his Violin Concerto. Now, this features Janusz Wawrowski on violin, the Lithuanian National Symphony Orchestra, and Christopher Lyndon-Gee, conductor. This is released on the Naxos label on July 11th, so it's a while back now. So we heard the previous entry in this series, which was a symphony for violin and orchestra, Widmung, also performed by Wawrowski. On our May 27, 2024 episode, Subtle Vibes, Subtle Vibrations. Not a bad title. That was episode 166. This is the first numbered symphony of Silvestrov's that we're hearing on the podcast. He has composed 9 symphonies to date, and at his age, you wonder if another one is coming. 9 seems to be the standard that Beethoven set, and so many composers have composed 9 symphonies. It's really strange. Anyway, putting words to Silvestrov's works isn't easy, but the music gives you a definite sense of what it's about through the feelings it conjures in you. They're complex, maybe a mixture that only music can produce and words can't pinpoint, and to me that makes Silvestrov a special composer. The booklet describes his first 4 symphonies as being tempered with reflection, inwardness, melancholy, and longing, with a sense of panoramic perspective, as if gliding far above the tumult of our times. That's a key sentence, I think. His music does seem to glide above the tumult of our times. It's apart from it, but it understands it and has witnessed it. His style features illusion without quotation, memory without nostalgia, strength without anger, softness without sentimentality. Well said. I think this is Christopher Lyndon-Gee's words there. The conductor says that Silvestrov's music deals with fundamental questions of life, especially regarding the meaning, origin, and justification of human existence. So Silvestrov is after the big questions. He wants big answers. In his compositions, he emphasizes beauty, depth, and harmony, which can emerge life-affirming, transcendent from conflict. Gidon Kremer has described Silvestrov's music as like a mass for everything that exists that is desirable, unattainable, or only to be arrived at in one's imagination. Beautifully said, Mr. Kremer. Let's hear the album. Tracks 1 through 4, Violin Concerto from 2016. Silvestrov has said that there are two principles underlying his violin concerto, the moment and the memory, or remembrance. The conductor, Christopher Lyndon-Gee, thinks the work is the junior cousin of the longer Symphony for Violin and Orchestra that we discussed on the podcast last year. In this work, as in the Eighth Symphony we'll hear afterwards, Silvestrov plays with the idea of treating a great form meaning like a concerto or a symphony, in a different, more intimate way, the opposite of grandiose. Often, Lyndon-Gee writes, this is articulated through the questing innocence of a circling phrase, echoed across instruments, enveloped in a cloud of string harmonics or clusters that do not quite obliterate it. Track 1, the first movement, is labeled Elegy, and it has 4 dynamic markings, allegro to andante to animato to adagio. So it seems to slow down as it goes. The opening theme is transformed into something more delicate by the solo violin, which plays the theme at half tempo. The orchestra returns with rapid, overcast phrases, which the violin always transforms to something more lyrical and introspective, until finally the orchestra transforms the opening motif into a Malerian cantabile. This dual nature will characterize the entire concerto until the violin's lyricism triumphs in the end. Yes, if we think of the violin as the individual and the orchestra as like the mass, it's almost as though the mass has some, really wants to cause some kind of destruction, and the violin just kind of calms it down sort of by giving it its words back to it in a more calming phrasing. It's a pretty interesting piece, and it really does work on you if you listen to it a bit. The piece begins with a dramatic buildup of tension, with the bass registering strongly. It's pretty dark. The violin comes in at 54 seconds and makes the opening sound less ominous. There's a halo of room sound around the violin tone on this recording. It stands out dramatically, but the violin sounds amplified compared to the orchestra. The violin responds to the second orchestral outburst at the 2-minute mark with pizzicati, then plays the opening theme again lyrically at 2 minutes and 19 seconds. It's not always calm, and in fact builds up tension via the opening line at the end of the second minute. The music, as is so characteristic with Silvestrov, dissipates, and so does the tension, as a more romantic, languorous version of the violin melody is heard from 3 minutes and 30 seconds onwards. I'm going to grab this sample in the middle of that somewhere. This is from the 4 minute and 10 second mark. And then I'll give you a little idea of the tone of so much of this movement. If you know Silvestrov's music, the accompaniment here is pretty typical, floating with remnants of material, ghostly, only here the violin sounds solid. As we approach the end of the movement, the violin tone gets softer and gauzier over the ghostly, floating accompaniment until what's left are individual pizzicato notes. The second movement, Intermezzo, is marked Allegro. This is track 2. This follows with no pause and features once again the orchestra aggressively building up tension with upward moving lines. The recording has a lot of room sound on it, perhaps too much. Every sound is haloed here. Detail is well defined due to the isolation each element is given, but this recording doesn't sound natural to me. It's got an overly wet sound. That's not to say it's not good or beautiful. It is, and it probably gives Silvestrov's fragmented lines more of a sense of float, but I think I'd prefer something a little more natural. The music is in fragments by the second minute with racing upward lines. Let me just give you the sample of the opening and see if you can hear what I mean. So the violin is more aggressive here too. The music is all in fragments by the second minute with racing upward lines being traded by orchestra and violin. There's a repeating bass pattern in the lower depths of the orchestra as all of this happens. Track 3 is the third movement Pastorale, marked Andante. We come into the third movement with the violin soloing, playing softly, falling away two-note patterns that grow into slightly longer patterns. The violin's melody is lovely here. Let's hear a sample. There's some attractive orchestration with winds being doubled by chiming percussion at around the 1 minute and 25 second mark. Here the orchestra and violin are in a fragmented dance together. The movement is calming in its remnants of memory. There's an attractive pizzicato version of the violin's line at around the 3 minute and 40 second mark. The movement proceeds with the theme growing shorter and quieter. And then we get a fourth movement marked Serenade, Andantino. This is track 4. There's an almost full melodic theme heard in the violin here, unusual for Silvestrov. It's lovely. Again, let's hear this. Now, hearing the violin and piano together in this kind of salon-like melodic section just kind of makes me think of memory. It sounds like a romantic era work, something kind of simple that people would just play to pass the time. And I think it's kind of trying to give that feeling to this concerto. The orchestral lines still have that floating quality. The theme seems to get shyer once we reach the 1 minute and 43 second mark, and there's a percussion line reaching into the stratosphere in its climb. The violin then plays the opening notes of its theme and sustains the last note to end the piece. All right, tracks 5 through 10, Symphony number 8, composed 2012 to 2013. Christopher Lyndon-Gee claims that while studying this score in 2022, he had the powerful feeling that Silvestrov already knew in 2012 to 2013 everything that would befall his country, Ukraine, not just in Crimea in 2014, but a decade later throughout Ukraine. We shouldn't think of the work as a reflection of Ukraine's condition, though. The work's reach is much bigger than that. Lyndon-Gee says the symphony is an homage to the human race, to the fundamental life force, to the tragedies that repeat themselves over and over in our existence. Yes, it's much bigger than what's happening today. But also to love and to humanity, to hope and to renewal. The silence into which the work descends at its close is not a silence of defeat, but of rich, meditative summation of all that has gone before. The work has 6 movements, but unfolds in a single unbroken span, and Lyndon-Gee says the division of the symphony on the page into 6 movements is somewhat misleading. It's helpful on the CD and on streaming, but you should really listen to this as let it just flow by without even looking at the track listings. I, of course, will mention the track listings because I'm going to have to talk about it, so I need to indicate where certain events happen. Each movement arises out of the dissolution of what went before. The composer presents, instead of development, a mosaic structure of constantly circling themes. The first movement is on track 5, and it's marked andantino to adagio, alternating, and then più mosso. It starts out with some stretched out, brooding sounds in the brass and percussion. Let's hear that. The music dwindles into a rut, then bursts out again at 1 minute and 15 seconds. These sort of outbursts lead to string lines that wind down and decrescendo. There's always some new output of energy that's then left to burn out or to have quieter repercussions. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, a more attractive theme comes out, played quietly. Some very pretty brass chords appear toward the end of the movement at the 4-minute mark. Then a new direction begins, setting up for the next movement. Track 6, marked moderato to allegro assai to maestoso. This movement starts with a rumbling in the lower orchestra, which elicits some pinpointed responses in forte in the higher end. The piano is heard here. At 1 minute and 15 seconds, its lines allowed to drift off. They're echoed and subtly answered in the rest of the orchestra. There's a big build-up via a sudden crescendo at the 2-minute mark. These elements then replay in fragments at a softer dynamic, and there's always that rumbling in the low end that we heard at the beginning. Let's hear a sample of this. And you're getting those repeating fragments there. You're kind of getting a little sense of the structure from that sample. Accented brass chords again sound at the 4-minute mark and fade into the Silvestrovian orchestral cloud to end the movement. Track 7 is the third movement, marked andantino. This starts with the piano playing almost a solo. Let's hear this. It's really unusual to hear in a symphony. Silvestrov will often use these sort of simple sort of melodic lines, romantic sounding lines to evoke memory. And it really works. I think even for us Americans, if we grew up and you took music lessons when you were younger, you had a lot of these simple melodies to play. And it just sort of brings you back to that time just to hear them. Or maybe you had a parent or a friend who played and you probably heard simple melodies like this long, long ago. It does have a sense of that. It's in a gentle romantic vein, the piano line, like it's portraying a memory of a better, more comfortable time. The strings respond at 1 minute and 14 seconds with a ghostly playing of the piano's theme, and this all dissipates to end this brief movement, and we move on to track 8, the fourth movement or section of the work, Andante, to allegro assai, to allegretto, to andante. This rather long section begins quietly and unassumingly, though there's a distant menace to the chord being played. That quiet rumbling low in the bass for movement 2 is back here. As though movement 3 with the piano were merely an interlude, it is called an intermezzo, and I guess that's what it is. We've awakened from our piano dream here and are back in the murky goings-on of the symphony's main trajectory. There's a lovely light string and chiming percussion flourish at about the 3-minute mark, and I really can't resist sampling this. That sort of chiming flourish repeats several times and is answered by unmoved brass. It's taken over by a harp in the 5th minute, and the orchestration is even subtler at this point, with a lot of timbral pleasure to be had for those who listen in carefully. Yeah, listen to this in a quiet room. That flourishing theme is reorchestrated each time we hear it. By the 6-minute and 30-second mark, it seems to have broken up, and the harp steps in to play a lightly waltzing theme, which is taken over by the piano, as if the harp has summoned the memory of the piano from the previous movement. The theme fragments as the movement goes on, and is stripped to individual tones by the end. Track 9 is the 5th movement, marked moderato to allegro vivace. This movement begins with a rumbling bass as well, that ever-present threat rising in dynamic here, with brass accents on the chords. So we have these building, ominous figures that sort of fade out and then just come back. By the 55-second mark, it's as emphatic as it's been in the whole symphony and continues to rise out of the orchestra's depths to higher, more defined tones. By 3 minutes and 22 seconds, we hear the piano again. But here it's playing the orchestra's menacing, rising tones. They continue and the dynamic falls by the end, though all of the menace is still there. And then track 10, the 6th and final movement or section of the work, is marked dolce and leggero. This movement connects to the previous one, and just past the beginning, a light wind line, accented by percussion chimes, is heard. The theme is often flute-led. That flute line keeps repeating like some kind of healing balm, and the orchestral sections have a different response to it every time. The flute theme does alter, but keeps its basic winding profile. By the third minute, the flute line has extended and risen higher in its range. There's a great, brief solo French horn line heard in the fourth minute, but blink and you'll miss it. After this, the orchestra seems to have settled into the flute's message and taken it on. The ending sounds hopeful as it just evaporates away. Both of these works are welcome additions to the recorded catalog of Silvestrov's music. I found both to be enchanting and to communicate in a way that only music can. I've tried to suggest in my descriptions above a bit of what I was pulling out of these works, but that can only be fragmentary. I have to say, I wasn't too happy with the overly wet production on the violin concerto. I'll agree that it accents Silvestrov's sense of music and memory slipping away, but I think the score didn't need the enhancement it seems to have here. The violin seems really pumped up in the mix, and it had me wondering how this work would fare in a concert hall. I'm sure the violin would be adequately audible there. There's a higher than normal level of production on the violin concerto, giving it a bit more sheen. Maybe it'll give the recording more popular appeal, and the music certainly deserves a wide audience, but I think this could have worked better in a more natural-sounding recording. The Eighth Symphony sounded more natural timbrally, though it was recorded during the same period in the same hall. It doesn't sound enhanced at all. I like the subtlety of expression in the Eighth Symphony, the way the quieter lines build up in the mind to have a lasting impact. The recording here was less enhanced, and that could be why I was able to settle into this score more than I could the violin concerto. It's a pretty compelling work, made of suggestions that strongly nudge at times. There are calming moments, particularly in the piano's line in the third movement, and the flute's phrase in the final sixth movement, both of which seem to have some effect on the distant disturbance heard in the bowels of the orchestra. It's almost as though a message of peace, or the right message of peace, one that fits the situation, calms the disturbance beneath. I think Silvestrov is writing music that could be deeply meaningful for our contemporaries, and I'd strongly urge anyone who's a fan of long composed movements of instrumental music to hear this album. It has a way of settling you into our current chaotic times. Now, I've said that the violin concerto, is a bit overproduced, but I think the work itself is fantastic and also has a very calming message. It's a great work, like I said, for our current chaotic times.
As with last year, when we listened to Symphony for Violin and Orchestra, the word brooding came out in my listening notes a lot. The recording notes discuss whether his music is postmodern and what that might actually mean. But Silvestrov's music is built around traditional harmony that has mostly familiar elements with some more unique combinations of tones and instrumental colors. It doesn't seem to be neo anything, but I find it rather to be focused on direct expression. I find his music elicits a lot of emotions. Here, from a brooding landscape, moments of brightness appear in a sweeter violin line or a simple yet honest piano melody, like a lot of the samples you highlighted. Those contrasting moments really stand out. I find his use of rhythm is very unique and interesting. The music requires patience, never seeming to be carried along by rhythmic motion. And now that we've heard 2 recordings of his works on the podcast, I'm getting an appreciation for his distinctive use of timbres and pacing, and how the music seems to focus you directly on that moment of what he wants you to hear right then. And that sticks in your memory as well. A very interesting compositional approach.
Yeah, like he said, the moment. And that's something we should really be focusing on ourselves as well. So if that music helps us to do that, I'm all the more for it. I think we should be listening to this as much as we're listening to Arvo Pärt's music. He really should be that popular. So listeners, give this one a listen. I really want to strongly encourage you to hear this entire album.
It's fairly easy listening, too.
Yeah.
It's full of familiar elements and lots of interesting tonal surprises, too. I find it engaging, and you don't drift away because there's something constantly unfolding. All right, over on the jazz side, we've got an interesting mix of music. Back in early June, we interviewed Lenny Pickett and drummer percussionist John Hadfield about their recording Heard by Others Too. That was on Ajaropa Records. And in the interview, John told us about music that he's been working on. And he told us he's been working with Ron Blake and his Scratch Band project. And when I saw this recording come out, I thought we'll take a listen to that and see what it's all about. So this is Scratch Band by Ron Blake and Reuben Rogers and John Hadfield. This is on Blake's own recording label. I'm not sure how you read this. It's 71033 Productions, but the E and 10 has a long line, so I don't know if you're supposed to read it as 1733 Productions, maybe. It came out on August 8th. Saxophonist Ron Blake was born in Puerto Rico, but he grew up in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. He began playing sax at age 10. In 2012, he won his first of 3 Grammys as a member of Christian McBride's big band for The Good Feeling. He's been a member of the Mingus Big Band Orchestra since 2014 and the Love Rocks New York City House Band, led by bassist Will Lee, since 2017. Over his career, he's recorded with Benny Golson, Art Farmer, and Roy Hargrove, among many others, and this is his 6th album as a leader, the 2nd on his own label. The recording description, what's available online, mentions that Scratch Band references a tradition of folk music performed by storytellers and groove makers where Blake grew up in St. Thomas. And this music doesn't try to emulate that music, but follows their simple and engaging approach. So we've got Ron Blake on baritone, tenor, and soprano saxophone, Reuben Rogers on bass, who's also from the Virgin Islands. He's worked with Wynton Marsalis, Roy Hargrove, Joshua Redmond, Nicholas Payton, Mulgrew Miller, Jackie McLean, Charles Lloyd, and Diane Reeves over his career, and John Hadfield on percussion. The recording gets underway with a tune called Bassman, and this was a 1970s hit for calypso artist Shadow, real name Winston McGarland Bailey. And as the title suggests, the bassman here, Rogers, gets to start it out with some spirited bass over light skittering percussion from Hadfield. If you're not in a good mood yet, you will be when Blake's bari sax comes in with the calypso melody. Let's check it out. And let's hear some of Blake's improvisations later on with a perky agility on the big horn. As it goes on, Blake keeps the tune going while Rogers gets some improvisations to the end. Track 2, a standard, Body and Soul, from Johnny Green way back to 1930. Blake gets to start this out on his own with improvisations before Rogers joins in, and they get to the famous melody At a Leisurely Stroll. The only percussive sounds you'll hear on this track are the clicking of Blake's keypads. It's that closely and intimately recorded. Rogers gets some solo time too, with the notes really ringing out on his bass. Let's hear a little bit of his playing too. And Blake's back for a final melody section that takes it to a placid ending. Track 3 is a Roy Hargrove tune from his 1995 family recording, Another Level, and Blake played tenor sax on that recording. Hadfield sits this one out too, but Blake and Rogers really lock in rhythmically right from the start of the melody, and Blake is on tenor here. Let's come back in and hear the climax of his sax improvisations. next Rogers gets some improvisations with some cool double stops on the way. Track 4, Lift Every Voice and Sing. This is sometimes referred to as the Black National Anthem. It was composed as a poem by James Weldon Johnson in 1899, set to music by his brother John Roseman Johnson in 1900, and the song was adopted by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People as its official song. On the jazz side, it's a tune recorded and played often by Charles Lloyd. Rogers starts this one out solo on bass, with Hadfield coming in with some backing percussion. That lasts for about 3 minutes, and then Blake takes over solo on tenor with the melody, really singing it out with some neat tonal effects. Let's take a sample from that point. Pretty cool tonal effects there. And in the final section, the three join together. Track 5 is a Ron Blake original tune, Grace Ann, and this is from his 2023 Mistaken Identity recording. That was also a duet between Rogers and Blake there, so I guess they liked it so much they decided to record it again. It's a waltz with interesting twists in the melody and harmony. And Blake solos, and also then keeps the accompaniment going behind Rogers' solo on this one. Track 6 is Appointment. This is a tune that Blake recorded with Virgin Island-born drummer Dion Parson on the recording 21st Century from the year 2000. Hadfield gets to join in on the funky fun here with some hypnotic bass ostinato from Rogers. Blake is on soprano for this one. Yeah, there's some Caribbean flavor in there. And let's hear some of the modal fun in Blake's soprano sax solo on this one. Blake comes back in a while, he'll switch to tenor sax and space out his lines over the cool bass and drum groove. Track 7, a Blake original sung for Maya, and this is for his eldest daughter. Roger starts this out solo with some cool open double stops and harmonic before setting the waltz feel for the tune for Blake to come in on the tenor sax. Let's hear it get started. It's a nice melody, and the interaction between the duo is quite nice throughout. Let's hear the ending of this one. Track 8 is La Conga de Juana by Cuban singer-songwriter Kelvis Ochoa Cruz. This one is rhythmically infectious from Roger's rhythmic bass and Hadfield's building percussion under the longing minor melody on Barry's sax. Let's check it out. percussion the next time around there. And on this tune, Blake's improvisations stay melodic and rhythmic with a very nice bari sax tone. Let's hear a little bit more. And the recording ends up with track 9, April's Fool, a Ron Blake tune from the Roy Hargrove 1994 recording with the tenors of our time. It starts rubato on bari sax with Hadfield adding percussion textures. Let's take a listen. Interesting interactions and sounds emerge in Blake's improvisations. Let's take one more sample. A very minimalist approach results in intimate communication and straightforward expression on this recording. Often the music is a conversational duet between Rogers and Blake. Things get more rhythmic and groove-oriented on Appointment and La Conga de Juana, where Hadfield's percussion is used to full effect. The program revisits Blake's musical history with 2 tunes from his time with Roy Hargrove, one from a recording with Dion Parson and one from his last recording. Add in a standard and some more Caribbean-flavored tunes, and the content is varied. Blake's bari sax tone is appealing with a lot of different aspects to his sound, and he also adds in tenor and one tune with soprano sax. Sometimes less is more, and here it's just enough for music that should pull you in and sometimes make your toes tap.
Yeah, this album went by fast. Oddly, the cordless baritone sax turns out to be an enjoyable listen.
Yeah.
I should say a lot of that is because of the many roles that Reuben Rogers plays on bass, sometimes anchoring the bass, sometimes providing counter melody, and often doing both at the same time. He's really the superhero on this album, and he's got a full, present, deep sound, always audible. Of course, Ron Blake on baritone sax is a pleasure to hear throughout. Rather than going for reedy honks, he favors the melodic side of the instrument, and when he plays low in its range, it's for darker effects. Percussionist John Hadfield is in a more decorative role for most of the album, providing light percussion effects during bass-driven tracks, and laying down cool grooves in the opening track, Bass Man, and in Appointment, track 6, and of course, La Conga de Juana, track 8. It's a clear, spacious recording that invites the listener in and very enjoyable.
Yeah. All right, next let's go over to the UK for drummer Kai Craig with his A Time Once Forgotten on Whirlwind recordings. This also came out August 8th. Born in Brighton in 2000, Kai Craig started studying drums at the age of 6 with his father. He moved to London at age 18 to study at the Royal Academy of Music, and he graduated in 2022, also studying with Kenny Washington and Tai-Shan Sori. He was mentored by Martin France in the UK and Gregory Hutchinson in Europe and in the USA, and this is Craig's debut recording. He's played with many musicians in London, Paris, and now he's based in New York. So Kai Craig on the drums, Sean Payne, Craig's best friend, on alto saxophone. On trumpet, we've got James Kopis, who we've heard on the podcast with trumpeter Sean Gibbs, and also we heard him on the Some Days Are Better, The Lost Scores Kenny Wheeler legacy that featured the Royal Academy of Music Jazz Orchestra, and also with saxophonist Alex Western King on a recording called Sideslip on Ubuntu. On piano, we've got Rainer Bohm from Germany and Gerard Portal on bass from France. This was recorded at Riverside Studios, Cologne, Germany, on the 9th and 10th of January 2024, engineered by Rolf Kemper, Nick Benoit, and Sam Donnelly's. Mixed by Nick Benoit at Riverside Studios in Cologne, Germany. Mastered by Dave Darlington at Bass Hit in New York. Produced by Gregory Hutchinson. Executive producer Michael Janisch. The recording is going to get underway with the Sean Payne original Namesake. Craig starts it out on drums, and bass and piano add in with ominous open fifths. Payne and Kopis are in on the dangerous and jagged 36-measure melody with tricky interaction and gaps in the bass and drums. Let's check this out. And after that little 8-measure interlude, they go around again, and Bohm is launched into a piano solo. It's exciting and percussive. After the piano solo, Craig is off on a drumming frenzy, getting joined by Payne with sax improvisations. Let's check that out. piano and bass are back to set it up for once more through the dangerous melody. It's a high-energy start to the recording. Track 2 is a Wayne Shorter tune, When You Dream. This is from his 1985 Atlantis recording. A funky, clicky groove like the original. That had electric bass, but Portal sounds cool here on acoustic, getting a little interlude as well. Bohm's on electric piano here, and the horn lines are playful and interactive. Now, the main feature solo-wise on this tune is a synth solo. Is it a keyboard or is it an iwi played by Payne? I'm not sure. There's nothing in the Bandcamp notes about it. Let's take a listen. Going for that real 1980s sound there. But we don't often hear those shorter tunes covered, so that was kind of an interesting choice. Track 3 is a Fred Hirsch tune, Phantom of the Bopera. This is from his 1991 recording, Forward Motion.
I bet Gas Hughes is kicking himself for not coming up with that title.
Yeah, he always has those bop-related titles.
Yeah, Nuclear Bobopolyps, all that. You know, this is probably going to be the name of his next album. And then he's like, oh, somebody took it.
The horns are out for this trio tune. A neat rhythmic bass intro from Portal with some harmonics, and that goes on for almost a minute. So I'll just give you a taste of that into the main tune a little bit in. I like the fun stop and start feel here with the chugging bass from Portal when it's moving along, and nice fills and cymbal work from Craig. Bohm is in the spotlight on piano here, so let's hear some of his improvisations on this one. into some vamping around from there for Craig to get in some energetic drumming to a fade out. Track 4 is Dry Stone. This is by John Taylor, one of the top UK pianists, a player I really enjoy a lot. You can find this tune on his 2005 recording, Angel of the Presence, and also on 1992's Ambleside Days with saxophonist John Sermon. This starts with some soft but growing cymbal work from Craig. Piano and bass join in with drum fills around the kit in free rhythm. The beginning will be hard to catch in a sample. Payne has the next section, and then Kopis will join in from where Kopis joins in, and Payne stays on for backing while Craig works up the drums more in rubato fashion. Up to a climax and then subsides to barely escaping horn lines. Track 5, Midnight Silence, a tune by Kenny Kirkland, a pianist who played with the Marsalis brothers, Kenny Garrett, and others, including Sting on the Dream of the Blue Turtles album. He only recorded one album as a leader before dying much too young, and this is from his self-titled GRP release from 1991. This is arranged by Sean Payne, who gets to start it out with Bohm. Let's hear it get started. The others join in as it takes on a slow but steady waltz tempo. Kopis has an imaginative and high-reaching trumpet solo on this one, so let's hear some of his playing. Bohm is up next for a piano solo on this one. It works to a hold, with Craig continuing on for some solo drums to the end. Track 6 is a Craig original Dealin'. This is for Roy Hargrove, a driving post-bop tune. The horn melody seems to be 31 measures with tricky rhythmic change-ups along the way, handled nicely by Portal's bass lines. Let's check it out. Take the melody around again. Kopis is up first for a solo on this one, and Bohm follows on piano. Let's check out his solo on this one. Exciting playing, and it's back to once more around the melody and a finish on the opening horn line. Track 7 is The Chieftain. This is an improvised solo by Kai Craig for Jeff Tane Watts, and in the notes it says, quote, "I wanted to give thanks to Tane, a guiding figure in my development and one of my biggest inspirations." And Jeff Tane Watts is one of our favorite drummers, too, for his explosive drumming. Let's check out a little bit of this solo drumming here from Craig. Getting a lot of interesting tones and textures around the drum kit. On to track 8, Lunations by Michael Brecker. The notes say it was originally penned for Brecker's late 90s album Time is of the Essence, but never commercially released. So I investigated a little bit more, and this didn't appear on the official studio release of the album, but it was included as a bonus track on the version released in Japan, as sometimes happens. So I went over to the shelves with my flashlight looking for my copy, and unfortunately I have the US release without the bonus track, so maybe I'll pick it up in the used record shop here. It's a free-flowing start, and then Craig and Portal get the unique New Orleans flavor groove going. I don't know how it's written, but it feels like 3 bars of 4 and then a bar of 2 beats. Bohm adds to it with his left hand and right hand fills before the bouncy horn lines come in. Yeah, interesting groove. Payne is up first for a sax solo, and then Kopis on trumpet. Let's hear one more from him. And back to the funky and fun horn melody lines from there. And the recording ends up with track 9, Afterthought. This is an improvised duet between saxophone and drums, and the notes say it gives a final nod to Jack DeJohnette. This builds energy as it goes, and I hate to cut it off midway, so let's just play it. And that's it. A lot of youthful talent and energy is on display here between Kai Craig and saxophonist Sean Payne. At 38 minutes, it's a short but to the point debut recording, showing respect to influences Wayne Shorter, Michael Brecker, Roy Hargrove, Jeff Tain Watts, Jack DeJohnette, and the UK's own John Taylor. Craig and Payne both contribute original compositions too. Craig's drumming is exciting, and he's comfortable hanging with free rhythm and making textures in rubato settings. Payne's sax solos stand out for their direction and intensity, as do Kopis's hot trumpet solos. Bohm and Portal round out the rhythm section and get spots to show their own personalities too. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from these young fellows in the future.
This is an album with adventurous elements within a traditional framework. Kai Craig is a powerful drummer, with a few interesting grooves in there too. When he solos, he really takes off. Sean Payne and James Kopis, the two brass players, both get into some adventurous harmonic territory in their solos and handle it well. I liked Payne's saxophone high wire act on the last brief track, Afterthought. I also enjoyed Rainer Boehm's piano, who had some interesting angular grooves and otherwise kept things anchored, and Giraud Portal's mobile bass lines, though I thought the bass sound on the album could have used some focus on the recording. The recorded sound gets shapeless in the low end so that we hear this kind of gluey low sound on the bass and the bass drum. When Portal solos on the bass, however, all is well, and his tone sounds clear. An interesting album that's different enough to catch my attention.
Yeah, debut.
Yeah.
You heard it first on Adult Music. All right, and finally we'll go to Chicago for trumpeter Marcus Rutz's Many Moons on Third Coast Sounds. This also came out August 8th. Marcus Rutz was born in Chicago and moved to Colorado with his family. He then settled in Marshfield, Wisconsin, studying at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He moved to New Orleans later, where he studied and lived for nearly 5 years before heading back to Chicago. He lists his influences as Miles Davis, Fats Navarro, and Clifford Brown, Lee Morgan, Art Farmer as well. This is his 8th album as a leader, and thanks to Marcus for sending me credits and additional information about the recording. The notes say, Many Moons is the album title chosen for the project because of its meaning. The expression and representation for a continuum of time is more personally a measure of time for me within music performance, recording, and composition. My work with these aspects unfolds each month as time passes, making this album into a documented timestamp of my creativity in the present. And later on in the notes, I liked this part as well. The visual change and slower pace of moon phases takes me to another place. It's also the hope with this album for the listener, whether to find good feelings, inspiration, solace, or just a momentary respite from the saturation of global events and circumstances we face. Many Moons is intended to provide just such a soundscape for you.
Well, just like the Silvestrov album.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should pair those.
So let's escape into a little lunar music here. On trumpet, Marcus Rutz. Tenor sax, Bryce Winston. Alto sax, we've got Sherelle Cassidy, who we've heard a few times before, and also Greg Ward on one track. Piano, Adrian Rees. On guitar, Matt Gold. We've got 2 bassists. I'll point them out as we go along. Christian Dillingham and Samuel Peters. And on drums, Gregory Archery. Sound recording by Brian Fox of Electrical Audio Chicago. Sound engineering by David Stoller. Samurai Recording at Astoria, Queens, New York. And the producer is Greg Ward. So as the notes humorously allude to, there's a lot of mooning going on in this recording. Yeah. And we're going to start out with a Rutz original, Penumbra, which is the shadow cast by the Earth or Moon over an area experiencing a partial eclipse. This was also the title of his 2024 EP recording. Some tasty guitar from Matt Gold on the 8-measure intro before the 24-measure ABA horn melody. Bryce Winston on tenor sax on this track. There's some fun dissonance with seconds in the horn lines, and Rutz is off right away on a solo. I'll give you a long sample on this one so we can get through the melody and trumpet solo. Nice phrasing and some tricky, agile phrases. I like the chugging bass by Peters on this tune. Winston follows on tenor sax, building up excitement and a nice edgy tone in spots. The opening horn lick works as a transition to a break for a piano solo from Ruiz. Clean toned and snappy piano lines. He previews the final horn melody section by ending up on the opening lick. They get into some vamping and work that lick a couple times for an ending while Archery builds up the drums. A good mood and a nice post-bopping start. Track 2 is also a Roots original, By and By, an 8-measure intro with both horns and a backbeat that really pushes things along. Sherelle Cassidy is on alto sax here. The main melody is 20 measures started by Roots with cool answering phrases from Cassidy. Let's check it out. Cassidy's getting going on a solo first, so let's come back in and hear some more of her playing. Is next, keeping it lyrical over the popping beat and reaching up higher. Things chill out for a piano solo from Ruiz that starts with softly ringing notes before more running and rhythmic ideas. One more horn melody section wraps it up. Track 3, Van Morrison's Moon Dance, the title track from his 1970 album. Everyone knows this tune. They keep it in the spirit of the original. Cassidy on alto here too, in a nice arrangement with Roots. There's some nice Latin-y cymbal work from Archery along the way as well. Roots solos first there, and he's followed by Cassidy, and they take a final run through the famous melody to wrap it up. Track 4 is a Roots original, Before We Met, a medium-tempo straight beat tune. The first part of the intro is actually the end of the 16-measure horn melody we'll hear. Let's check that out. for a warm-toned guitar solo, mixing in chords nicely. Let's check out some of his playing. Has a delicately articulated solo, and Dillingham gets a couple rounds on a melodic and snappy bass solo before a final melody section with final phrase repeats and a little coda ending. Track 5 is a Joe Sample tune, Aso Kam, from trumpeter Blue Mitchell's 1974 Graffiti Blues album that had Joe Sample and Walter Bishop Jr. on piano. They keep the top-down cruising groove feel of the original. That had electric bass, but it sounds great on Dillingham's acoustic bass here. Solos first on this one, then Gold on guitar with some edgier tone on this one and springy figures. And this is Cassidy's last tune on the album, so let's hear one more sax solo from her. Very nice, and some horn melody lines take it from there to a rippling piano solo from Ruiz that goes to a soft unwinding ending. Track 6 is the title track, Roots' Many Moons, a slow horn line intro over drum toms to a hold, then the rhythm section gets it going at the tune's tempo. Bryce Winston is in here for the minor melody that has some fun twists. It sounds like 16 measures around twice. And they'll take it around once more, and things get chugging with walking bass for Roots' solo. Let's hear his playing on this one. Winston follows on tenor, and then Samuel Peters on bass gets some trading with Artry before the final melody section. And a famous Moon tune, The Blue Moon, from Richard Rodgers all the way back to 1934. This gets a light and snappy treatment here, with the only horn being Roots. No saxes here. Let's check it out. Roots works into a bluesy solo, and on this one it's time to check out some piano from Ruiz with a charming solo with fun tremolos. And Dillingham and Artry get some light trading on bass and drums next, before Roots returns with the melody. Track 8 is a Roots original, Denouement. This one has a 60s minor mood to it with a clicky beat. There's an opening 12-measure section with a horn riff that will end up the 16-measure melody. Winston's lit up with the solo right out of the gate there. Let's come back in and hear some more of this playing. Roots follows, then Gold, and then they vamp a bit for Archery to get some drumming excitement in before the final melody section. Track 9, another Roots original, On the Bosrand. A happy 24-measure melody over a playful samba-like rhythm. The opening phrase returns to a cute ending. Ruiz is off on an energetic solo. Let's hear Roots on this one. Smooth and lyrical playing there. Winston follows before the final horn melody section and a fading vamp with some more tasty piano from Ruiz. Track 10 is Blue Skies, the Irving Berlin tune from the Ziegfeld production Betsy, 1926. I guess you can see the moon in the blue skies in the daytime sometimes.
Yeah, I remember hearing this song sung by Bobby Vinton the first time I ever heard it.
Oh, wow. Bobby Vinton.
When I was a child.
Well, everyone knows this melody.
Yeah.
And this is done in a fun Latin rhythmic duo version with Ruiz. Let's check it out. Ruiz takes some solo space on this one too. It's a lot of fun, and it has a nice final piano flourish to it as well. And the recording ends up with a Bryce Winston original, Time to Spare. A warm rubato piano and trumpet intro started out. It picks up into the repeating 16-measure trumpet and sax melody. Melodies gets a piano solo first on this one, followed by Roots and Greg Ward, who's in on alto for this tune, and then Winston. And then the saxes get into some exciting trading next, and that's what we'll check out for our final sample. Stop it there. They keep pushing things right on up until Roots joins back in for the final melody section, and that ends the recording. Well, it's an enjoyable recording of post-bop jazz with a program built around a concept of marking out time by the moon. It turns out to be a fun theme with a lot of variety of musical material, including originals by Roots, one from Winston, and an assortment of moon tunes all the way from Van Morrison to Richard Rodgers, and a 70s Joe Sample tune from a Blue Mitchell recording. Swinging Latin beats and more straight R&B type grooves mix things up nicely from the rhythm section with standout solos from Ruiz on piano. Cassidy and Winston weave horn lines with Roots on the melodies, with Greg Ward joining in on the final tune. Exciting sax solos by all throughout, and Roots' solos are fine on trumpet throughout the recording with a sense of direction and exploration and often impressively lyrical playing. A very good recording from Chicago that you should definitely check out.
Yeah, this is my favorite of the three jazz recordings we heard this week. It's a highly appealing album, and I got into it right away, and each track proved addictive and really, as you said, uplifting. So I'd say mission accomplished to Marcus Roots. Each track was addictive. I really enjoyed Matt Gold's guitar playing on this album. So I really singled him out. He was inventive, and his solos and his tone and voicings produced this warm, appealing sound, so I was really kind of getting into that. Adrian Ruiz on piano was classy throughout, and he got bluesy on Blue Skies, and that track had the appropriate rhythm for that track, I think, because there are always blue skies where that rhythm comes from.
Yeah.
In fact, he supplied all of the rhythm here on the piano on that track. Marcus Roots is an appealing trumpeter who solos in a melodic fashion and hooking me in strongly. There are 3 sax players on this album, but tenor Bryce Winston and alto Greg Ward are the only 2 who share the same track, the last one. Each of these players, along with Sherelle Cassidy on tracks 2 through 5, makes their mark on the tracks they play, getting into the swinging groove. 2 bassists figure on different tracks, both Christian Dillingham and Samuel Peters, providing thumping tone. It's a great, straightforward, swinging album with lots of taste in the solos and some familiar tunes among the original compositions, too.
Yeah.
I'd like to have this one, and this one's only available, I think, through his website at the moment, so I don't know. Got to see what the shipping fee is going to be for this before I go for it.
Yeah, definitely like to have this one on CD because I think I'm going to be coming back to it quite a bit.
Yeah, me too. I would, too. This would be ideal. This would be one of those albums I'd listen to again and again. It's very uplifting.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for episode 224 of Adult Music. As always, we want to say thanks to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we've got some music lined up for next week, episode 225. What's on the classical menu, Mike?
Well, I've got 3 recordings that were released this Friday, amazingly enough, because it's sort of the low season for classical releases. Yeah. An album of madrigals by Italian composer Nicola Vicentino, a composer whose name I've never heard before, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. That's on the Dynamic label, or maybe it's Dynamique, or Dynamique, maybe?
Dynamique.
If you're European, it's an Italian label, so that's not an Italian word. Anyway, we have piano quintets by 4 British composers, late 19th to late 20th century, and that's by Peter Donahoe and I Musicanti on the Somme label. And then we're going to listen to Abel Selauchoe's cello concerto for spirits that was just released on Warner Classics, and it's getting a lot of press, but we're going to talk about it too, because I like those African rhythms when they're applied in classical music. It's a kind of a crossover that I rather enjoy, so I'm curious to hear what he had to do with that.
Well, I'm kind of waiting for some new things to check out that are coming up towards the end of the month in jazz. So this past Friday, there were 3 recordings by artists that we've heard before on the podcast. Now that we're in our 5th year, we can sort of go on to multiple releases. Sometimes we've come across 3 or 4 by artists that we like. So I thought we'd check in again. Starting out with guitarist Jim Witzel and his quartet. He's got a recording of Bill Evans's music called Very Early, Remembering Bill Evans. There's a pianist on this recording too as part of his quartet, but I'm kind of interested to hear Bill Evans's compositions as interpreted by a guitarist. Another guitarist we've heard before, Craig Brann. His new recording is called For the Record on Steeplechase again. We heard him a few years ago, and this time he's got Rudy Royston and Greg Tardy on saxophone with him. A couple of big names, and I've already listened to this a couple times. It's got a lot of good tunes on it. So we'll check that out as well. And just by chance, 2 recordings with Rudy Royston, because we're going to go over to the Positone label. And of course, he's often part of the house rhythm section there. And we'll hear trumpeter Josh Lawrence's Still We Dream. All 3 of these recordings came out on August 15th, last Friday. So fresh stuff to get us through the middle of the month with some familiar names. All these recordings, the ones Mike just mentioned in classical and these jazz recordings, will be up on our Deezer playlist a few hours after this episode is published, and we'll have a link to it from our Facebook page as well. Any final words for this episode, Mike?
Well, yeah, last week we didn't get shut down by the algorithm for saying Minchia, the title track on Javier Girotto and Fabrizio Bosso's album Desde Cuando.
Right.
So I want to just finish this episode by saying it again. Minchia!
There you go. Italian lessons for our listening audience. All right, then. So until next time, keep listening. We'll be back next week with episode 225. And so we'll see you again next week.